later on. So on behalf of everyone from Fernwood, we're very pleased to publish this very important book. Others will talk about the book in more detail, but suffice it to say that the central concern of the Doing Anti-Oppressive Social Work are the inequalities and oppressions that underlie the problems that social workers are called upon to help others with. Doing anti-oppressive social work shows that poverty and trauma and housing and personal and various other social problems are the result of systemic racism and colonialism, patriarchy, and other structural oppressions. And the book also points to ways and explores ways of helping to address the systemic roots of people's troubles. Since the first edition, now this is now the fourth, literally thousands of people, literally thousands, many preparing for the world of social work, have been exposed to the social justice ideas in doing anti-oppressive social work. I think this is no small feat, and one I think that you should all be proud of. Like its predecessors, I think this book plays a key and a necessary role in changing the way social work fits into the world and changing the world in which we all live. And so for these reasons and others, Fernwood is honored to be a small part of the social justice changes that the Doing Anti-Oppressive Practice books are helping bring about. So thanks to Donna for first coming to Fernwood and trusting us with her book, and to Donna, Natalie, and Bindi for continuing that trust with this edition. And on a personal note, a couple of things I'd like to say. I've learned so much from Donna Baines in the four books we've done. Her insights about the understanding of the ways that power works in our society and how to resist that power have been many, and I thank her for that. And finally, it's been a huge pleasure to work with Donna on this and the other Doing Anti-Oppressive books. Publishing a book is inherently stressful. There's lots of difficult decisions and issues, and throughout the processes, Donna has always been clear-headed and open-minded and gracious in the conversations we've had. Donna actually makes being a publisher easy. So thank you very much, Donna.
Wow.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You did very well. Now, some people have just made me a little message saying they're going to be a tiny bit over. That's fine. We just try to keep as much as possible so everyone can speak. That's very important, of course. So, Donna, I'm going to hand over to you for your little 3 minutes now.
Thank you. Thank you, Wayne, for those very, very kind and generous words. No one could ask for a better publisher and friend in the world of publishing. You've really been just top-notch through every edition. So I want to just say a few words here of gratitude. I want to start off by acknowledging I'm an uninvited guest on the ancestral, traditional, and occupied territory of the Musqueam. I have blood relations from Europe and chosen family from across the globe. Some of this family have dedicated their lives to social justice, and it is them I hold closest as kin. My pronouns are she, her. I would like to thank you all very sincerely for joining us today. This is a happy celebratory moment. The project was hatched many years ago when I was first an undergrad, actually studying under Ben Carnio decades ago at the University of Calgary, and then later as a graduate student at Carleton and finally U of T. And like many of my classmates, I thirsted for more content on social justice, more theory and practice implications of how to do equity and socially engaged practice. So in 2004, I gathered together some critical, cutting-edge social work scholars, most of us very beginning at that point, to write the first edition of Doing Anti-Oppressive Practice. Like the current edition, the first edition foregrounded the voices of those less heard in social work academia. It offered a twinning of critical, intersectional, anti-oppressive theory and practice, which I think we've helped to put on the map in many ways and move along in significant ways in Canada, of course, with many other colleagues, practitioners, and students. When I was first approached by Fernwood to start thinking about a fourth edition, I actually felt that we needed a sea change, a really big change, in order to keep the book fresh and relevant. And Wayne Antony, who you've just met, was keen to do both a retrospective on how far we've come, as well as a rethinking of areas in social work where theory was thin and a critical lens was less developed. Hence, the focus in this 4th edition on decolonizing anti-oppressive practice, social work's relationship to the state, and intersectionality. We've tried to weave these themes across the chapters, and they come up in different ways and resonate in different strengths, in the various contributions from our outstanding authors. So keeping with the theme of foregrounding voices historically marginalized, I invited 2 Indigenous social work scholars who are actually just world-class and wonderful people. I invited them to join as co-editors, and that's Natalie Clark and Bindi Bennett. In the early conceptual days of the book, we also consulted extensively with Hannah Kia on transgender and 2S LGBTQI issues. And we have a number of very promising and interesting young authors joining us in this 4th edition as a result of these collaborations. Our new team brought together new authors and new perspectives to the 4th edition, as well as incorporating much loved chapters from early editions. I am very grateful to my co-editors, Natalie and Bindi, as well as our awesome authors all across all the editions, our publisher Fernwood and Wayne Antony, and all the highly dedicated and skilled staff at Fernwood. I'd also like to give special thanks to my research assistants, Dylan Lambie-Rain and Frankie Cabahug, who just took on every task thrown at them, and to our staff member here at UBC School of Social Work, Shelley Awata. I'm very grateful also to all the students, instructors, and social workers who have used the book across the years to make this world a better place. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart. I am in deep appreciation of all of you and your unwavering commitment to social justice, decolonization, and equity. I'll pass the floor back to Bindi Bennett to get us on with the nuts and bolts of this launch. Thank you.
Excellent. And if anybody else is tweeting along with me, I am tweeting our launch. I'm the social media geek today, which is a bit of a scary thing when you know me. So our first section is our forward. I'm not sure if we have Professor Raven Sinclair on the line. I had a quick look and couldn't see. If she comes on, we'll go back to her. That's no problem. So our first section is on intersectional practice. And in chapter 2, we talk about I knew I was going to get things wrong, but really I'll let the authors come and have a speak to it themselves. But such a great analysis on colonial violence. Shall we go and pass to chapter 2?
Right.
Yeah, Natalie?
I think that's me. Yeah, can you hear me, everyone?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome, YTAP, Natalie Clarkensquest. I'm grateful to be joining you from beautiful Secwepemc. And just to bring an idea of land-based practices, right before this launch, my dog had a deer in the front yard, obviously that had been taken down by a cougar. So I hiked the mountain to find the spot and offer some tobacco. Anyways, very snowy. I live in the woods. So I just want to recognize that, that I'm here located in Secwepemc, which is near Kamloops, British Columbia, Chase, to be honest. Just recognize that I bring myself to this work through my interconnected identities, including my settler ancestry, in particular Clark and the Irish side, and as a parent and grandparent of Secwepemc children and youth, part of the Secwepemc community, and through my kinship ties, an academic, activist, sexual abuse counselor, I still do that work, and my own intersecting kinship relationships to Indigenous communities, Secwepemc and Métis. So I'm grateful, and I'm going to start my timer. Oh, I did. Look at that. I'm probably thought I might just get through the intro and be done. I feel like this work is complex, and yet maybe it's not in that realm. I feel like when I was living and working in the beautiful Musqueam Nation, thank
Just
saw
pausing there with Natalie. You just froze. So just
Oh.
paused. Yep, start again. Sorry, not from the intro.
Okay. Oh, goodness. It says my internet is unstable. I do live up a mountain. Goodness. So I just wanted to acknowledge Elder Doris for her words. Hopefully you hear me. And just recognize that these teachings every day are lived and understood on the bodies of our children and youth that we work with. And I remember one of my own twin sons looking at the memorial marker near his daycare on Hastings and saying, "Mom, can two things come together?" Being an Indigenous child and how does that work? And he was like 6 or 7 and really understanding and trying to make sense of violence on this land as a young Indigenous person. And I really believe that this theory, you can call it intersectionality or whatever word you give to it, holism, recognizing Indigenous peoples and the languages that may not be the word. I follow on the work of Sandy Grande and her work in particular in terms of red. But I think that the piece I wanted to share today is the theorization. I quote and cite Zikala Sa in this chapter. And I know when I found her work that she really theorized as an Indigenous woman and lawyer at the time of contact in the 1800s, 1900s about how violence was connected to access to land and in particular targeting the bodies of girls. When she was writing back then, and she said, I'm not even looking, the elder told me to speak from my heart, that there's no tweaking this, like there's the need we need to transform this. And I feel like we're still saying that, from 1920 to now, the need for transformation. And so I think the parts I want to draw attention to is sort of moving beyond those risk paradigms, even though it is about violence, and I'm aware of my time here. I get to every week be witness to the beauty of our Indigenous elders and girls as they move through space and land, jumping into water, theorizing their movements in puddles and giggles. Wrote a shirk grant where we got to go camping. I got to buy tents and they did authorize that. I put the elder in at the fullest salary I could find and said still that her knowledge was immeasurable and in kind. And our research office said it wouldn't be funded, and it was. To me, that's the theorizing that I want to do, is the theorizing of the spaces of joy, of perseverance, of resistance and resilience. And I'm going to close with, of course, my screen froze here and I think I'm out of time. She might be cutting me off already.
I'm giving you a look.
I know, I'm done. I was going to say I had a poem I wrote for the girls I work with.
Let's come back. Maybe put it in the chat, Natalie. That would be, if we run out of time and you want to say more authors, please put it in the chat. We can have like Perfect. A waterfall of beautiful thoughts coming through. So chapter 3 with understanding the state, a central anti-oppressive social work skill, is with Donna and Dylan. I'd like to hand over to those authors, please.
Hi, thank you. My name's Dylan. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a forensic social worker and lifelong learner in Coquitlam on the traditional territories of the Coquitlam people. Dr. Baines and I co-wrote this chapter as we strongly believe that understanding how the state is connected to social work and how social work functions within the state is essential to anti-oppressive practice. All social work is impacted by the state through forms of government, regulation, and policy. And one may more quickly identify this within public service social work in context of hospitals, child welfare, corrections, and mental health and substance use services. However, social work's role has been greatly shaped by the state overall. And within this context, social workers must balance the controlling and coercive actions of the state while also resisting acting like the soft cops of the capitalist state. Social workers can act as soft cops when they undertake policing type roles with a less aggressive approach, or also while they're acting as gatekeepers, as we're acting as gatekeepers of resources that quiet but do not redress social problems or injustice. And understanding the roots of social work and our practice in the state is helpful, as we can begin to see what may have begun with positive intentions of social care have contributed to coercive systems that often prioritize profit making and cost reduction. And as a result, we find that our services are narrowed, we're overworked, we're underfunded, and our services are tailorized, leading to many social workers providing care that is rushed, thin, technical, all these things, rather than the holistic and affective care we likely got into this work to, provide, and the support that we'd like to. So important to anti-oppressive social work practice is a lot of things, but a core component is reflexivity and reflection, and not only on one's own practice, but also when considering the development of social work as a profession and the colonial harms historically and continued to be inflicted by social work, and the coercive care. Continued child welfare programs that systematically and disproportionately target racialized and newcomer populations, for example. Social work collaborates with community and school policing and domestic violence programs that result in over-policing, higher levels of arrests, incarceration, and police violence amongst poor and racialized communities. As well as we see the continued dehumanization, criminalization, and stigmatization of sex workers from the social work profession. Some of the recommended practices that Dr. Baines and I suggest to help resist the passive soft cop position with social work are, first, critical reflexivity and being humble in the face of lived experience. Second, active critical allyship. Third, cultural safety and cultural humility. Fourth, capacity to advocate and to mobilize colleagues and others around positive action. And I'll just wrap up here. Ultimately, we posit that to guard against social work's tendency to silently comply to or support oppressive state practices and to avoid becoming the controlling and or coercive arm of the state, as well as to resist sliding into the role of state-sanctioned soft cop. Social workers need to be based theoretically and concretely in critical and state theory to center the lived experiences and prioritize of marginalized and exploited communities, to commit to active and ongoing critical reflexivity, as well as to action and advocacy. So we hope you enjoy our chapter and learn as much as we did throughout the writing and editing process, but I'm excited to read everyone else's more thoroughly, and congratulations to everyone involved in the project.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, so now I'm going to hand over to Trevor Gates, who's going to speak to our chapter on cultural humility and working with Aboriginal LGBTIQ plus peoples in Australia.
Excellent. Well, I speak half as quickly as everyone else, but I'll do my very best to be on my best behavior, and I've got my own timer set as well. So Bindi and I wrote this collaborative writing piece on the land of the Gubbi Gubbi, Kabi Kabi peoples, and I particularly want to acknowledge my own university, Colorado State University, Pueblo, and Colorado is on the lands of the Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and other tribes. And I'm currently I love Bindi, and now Donna as well. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been up at 6:45. I'm currently in Vietnam as a Fulbright scholar in gender studies. I also want to acknowledge what Elder Doris said about the importance of telling stories. That particularly resonated with me because often the stories of queer communities are invisible or we're not told. And I think it's important to tell the story while not speaking for other people or other peoples. And so I think it's important that as we wrote this chapter, we consulted with Kaiwar and Kira, who told us a bit of what we needed to know about trans and gender diverse communities in Australia, brother boys and sister girls, because while we wanted to stand in solidarity with them, we could not speak for them. I'm a gay man, but I don't speak for all queer issues, and we can be allies without speaking for. So we argue in our chapter that as advocates for socially disadvantaged communities, we play a role in teaching our students to be advocates for Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples. Cultural responsiveness is our framework, and we attempt to shed light on LGBTQ, Two-Spirit, brother boys, sister girls, and other queer communities in Australia. And we make the case that their informal kinship ties are an important part of who they are, play an important role in shaping how we work with them, and we should be operating with a framework of cultural humility and respect. And we shouldn't be speaking for other people. So we encourage you to read the chapter and then to talk with other people about how they live their lives and what's important to them. So thanks, Bindi, and we can hand it over to our next person.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you for getting up so early. You are always a delight to work for, and with and around. And if anyone wants to check out Trevor on socials, Vietnam looks beautiful, so looking really nice there. Okay, so moving. I feel like I'm racing along, but we're doing great. Chapter 5: Seeing Low-Income Single Mums. Lee, is that? I knew I'd stuff up a name somewhere, but handing over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sorry to take a second there to unmute. You'd think we would have all had enough practice. So I want to just start by thanking Elder Doris, who's always so inspiring, and also just appreciating the opportunity to be part of this amazing book and group of contributors. Today I am on the unceded, and we're always, excuse me, so polite, the stolen lands of the Musqueam people. Conceptually, intersectionality facilitated new ways of thinking about and understanding old and enduring issues. Excuse me, poverty, racism, all of the spheres in which oppression operates. And as we all know, these are many, varied, seemingly always both static and enduring and evolving. So talking about single mothers, and I do so through a participatory action lens, one that sees them as both agents and social actors, is an opportunity to perhaps concretize the ideas that are represented by intersectionality. Sadly, single mothers in Canada, most anyway, embody so many of the intersectional spheres. They're more likely to be racialized, Indigenous, immigrants, and certainly poor. And those are their intersections, but they also represent the very social structures that sustain us and our oppressive world order. And as I say in the chapter, intersectionality applies not only to Rose and Hannah and Alma, whose stories I reflect on, and who are an integral part of my work and my research. And I respect very much the fact that I have the privilege of being able to kind of talk about them and tell their stories in a forum like this and in a forum like a book, because they can't and continue to not have a voice to do that themselves. But when I reflect on their stories, I want to kind of really emphasize the ways in which their stories are reflective of all of the power structures that continue, as this group of people all know, support white Eurocentric privilege. And I just want to conclude by wanting to appreciate that social work, hopefully aided by this book and its like, is moving to be on the right side of those intersectional struggles after a too long and dark history. In my life prior to academia, I ran a social housing organization. And it's always a little embarrassing to admit as a social work academic that we used to screen out any applicants with social work backgrounds because they tended to bring privilege, bureaucracy, and professional distance to our work, which we saw as being organic, grassroots, and where we tried to genuinely partner with the people that we housed. And just in wrapping up, I want to kind of say that I hope anyway that I would no longer feel the need to do that. And I thank Donna and the co-editors for this book and the ways in which they help move us along. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Before I move on to the next section, Donna, I just wanted to make sure that Professor Sinclair wasn't on still. She hadn't managed to get her internet. Okay, fantastic. So the next section is on theory and praxis, and we move to chapter 6, which is a critical clinical social work, and to Katrina or Judy, who may be online, please. Excellent.
Hi, I'm just going to very quickly introduce myself. My name is Judy McDonald, and I've had the great privilege to work with Dr. Brown, and we are from Dalhousie University, which is on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we also acknowledge the history of African Nova Scotia peoples as a distinct people as well. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Katrina.
Hi. So we want to start with the premise that we need to work hard at ensuring that critical theory and critical practice are linked. It doesn't just happen, that we need to consciously and deliberately do so. And doing so disrupts mainstream notions of micro, mezzo, and macro categories of practice. In other words, social justice-based critical clinical practice is never and can never be just micro. We argue that we need to challenge the coexisting and mutually reinforcing elements of biomedicalism and neoliberalism in mental health and disability service provision, which have had the effect of both co-opting social workers into individualizing, pathologizing, decontextualizing, and adopting depoliticized practices, while simultaneously producing significant moral distress among the social workers practicing. An important idea in this chapter is the idea of discursive resistance. As knowledge and power we know are joined through discourse, we disrupt normalizing practices of power when we challenge dominant discourse, such as the supremacy of biomedicalism and pathologizing approaches, as well as discourses around mental health and mainstream notions of disability. So counterviewing this dominant discourse and creating counter stories is a form of discursive resistance. We discuss in our chapter a case involving Celia, who experienced surviving a house fire at the age of 12, where she was both very significantly burned and lost her mother. This resulted in traumatic loss, chronic pain, living with significant scarring and fused fingers. Depathologizing and normalizing her coping responses alongside counter-storing dominant approaches to disability is central here. Her depression and self-isolation are responses to the trauma and to her overwhelming experience that the world is a dangerous place. And that's a summary of what we argue in the chapter. Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to be here and for participating in the book.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're moving to chapter 7, which occupied spaces with Kristen. Is Kristen here to speak?
I don't think Kristen joined us.
Okay, fantastic. Well, go and read that later. Chapter 8, which is bridging the activist practice divide. Donna, with Jacqueline.
Yep. So thank you very much. I'm Jacqueline Sauer, and I'm an uninvited guest on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. My family is of mixed Dutch, Ukrainian, and Norwegian backgrounds, and I'm also connected and really uplifted by my queer chosen family in this work. This chapter is a collaborative effort between myself and Donna Baines that focuses on bridging the activism practice divide. We draw on examples that illustrate ways to integrate activism into everyday work and explore ways to keep anti-oppressive analysis and values alive in practice, even when working within institutions that are not radical in nature. Donna highlights examples from her time working as a hospital social worker in the South Bronx, as well as her experiences in academia, while I reflect on my hospital social work practice in Vancouver, specifically with people who use substances in the context of the unregulated drug poisoning crisis occurring here and elsewhere. We engage in some discussion about politicized practice and our efforts to incorporate critical consciousness raising, to link with social movements, to use our privilege, and overall to center advocacy in our work. In my experience, working with people who use drugs requires a politicized social justice approach. Drug use exists within a larger context of criminalizing prohibitionist drug policies and their inequitable harms based on intersecting systems of oppression. Here, the government declared a public health emergency in 2016 due to an increase in overdose deaths, or more accurately, drug poisoning or policy deaths, a crisis that continues. In hospital, navigating the dominance of the biomedical model alongside an anti-oppressive approach has definitely been challenging, but there's also been opportunities for advocacy and change. So for example, incorporating critical consciousness raising into substance use group programming and taking opportunities to transform these interventions as sites for critical reflection where individual struggles can be connected to larger social and political systems, a bit of a departure from the kind of hyperclinical medical focus of hospital. Or identifying system gaps and taking steps to address those. So for instance, collaborating with like-minded colleagues to distribute harm reduction supplies in hospital, kind of prior to formal policy or approval, a bit of a take action now, kind of get permission later kind of approach. So while these small acts are certainly part of, larger work for policy and practice, as a policy and system change that's needed in this area, these types of acts further debate, challenged abstinence-focused hospital policies, and emboldened our collective efforts to work towards change while finding some new allies along the way. So a simple example that for me demonstrated the importance of finding like-minded colleagues, taking steps, however small, and building on small successes to foster momentum. And finally, ultimately, political practice has been a way to continue to cultivate hope in my practice and to center critical social justice approaches in my work. So thank you to everyone and for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay, so moving on to chapter 9, which is around reimagining social work resistance with Fritz.
Thank you, Bindi. And I'm Fritz, and I'm zooming in from the Treaty 4 territory. This is the homeland of the Métis Nation, as well as the territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota. This is where the University of Regina's Faculty of Social Work is located and where I am affiliated. My chapter is titled Reimagining Social Work Resistance Through the Resistance of the Below, Knowledge, Bodies, and Solidarities. It is a praxis chapter that explores the politics of resistance. When I was invited to write about this topic, I was actually nervous. And even right now, I'm nervous, surrounded by critical anti-oppressive scholars. I don't know what to write about because there are so many ways in which we can express our resistance against the dominant structures and discourses. And even all the writings in this book are already forms of resistance themselves. So I was given that, a little bit of a big task on how to go about it. And so as I continue to reflect on this topic, one question that I had in mind is where would our resistance be in the midst of neoliberal culture? And also asking, who is resisting? And by asking these questions allows me to expand the notion of resistance itself. So I framed this chapter that elucidates 3 directions of possibilities in which we can express our resistance against the status quo. 1, at the level of knowledge. 2nd, through our bodies, where I coined the term there as embodiments. And 3rd, through our social relations or our sense of solidarity. This paper allowed me to actually go back to my lived experience and subject position as the site of my analysis, my transnational diasporic subject position as someone who was born and raised in the Philippines, was educated there and had worked in that country, and as someone who also identified as a trans woman of color. This allowed me to juxtapose global North social work and global South practices of resistance, hence providing a geopolitical analysis of resistance. And I like this analysis because it allowed me to reflect on the imperialism of knowledge, and that is how knowledge produced from the global North continues to govern the knowledge and practices of the global South, including notions of resistance. So in this paper, I was so specific in terms of pointing and naming the ideology of liberalism as the dominant knowledge structure of North American social work practice, values, and ethics as that which shape or impact our bodies and our sense of solidarities or coalition building. I propose that we continue to be vigilant on how institutions of power destroy our possibilities of coalition. So finally, in this work, I anchor myself to transnational feminist thought and practice, and to anti-racist and anti-colonial scholars in social work. Some of them are also present in this collection, which I really highly cited. So I'm so much grateful of your work, and they allowed me to think that I'm not alone in this journey to reimagine our practices of resistance. Thank you.
I'm very impressed with all these people who I'm like, I'm going to time you. Oh no, I don't need to. You've got yourself really under control. Thank you so much. Just in our last section of specific lived experience and anti-oppressive practice with specific groups of people, chapter 10 is by Bonnie Freeman. Bonnie isn't with us today, but please feel free to go and check out that chapter. Our next one, though, is chapter 11, which is anti-Black racism, biopower and governmentality with Dore, Phillips and Gordon. Are they here?
Yes, we're here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome, great.
Bindi. I'm Gordon Pond, and thank you for having us. And Dorette and I would like to begin with an acknowledgement of the land. We occupy the original territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas here in Toronto, which is located in the Dish with One Spoon Treaty. And the Dish with One Spoon Treaty is a treaty that was formed by the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas, which bound these First Nations, but also all newcomers, to honor the land, respect the land, to share the resources, and to also live together with respect and in friendship. So as a settler, Chimagwech to the First Nations. And I will turn it over to Dorette.
Thanks, Gordon. I'd like to begin by thanking you all for attending tonight's book launch, and also thanks to Donna for inviting us to be a part of this important book. I identified as a Jamaican Canadian registered social worker. I've worked in the sectors of child welfare, violence against women and children and adult, and mental health. Gordon Pond identifies as a Chinese Canadian settler on Turtle Island who grew up speaking the Toisanese dialect of Cantonese. And prior to joining the faculty of social work at Toronto Metropolitan University, he worked in frontline positions within child welfare. Our chapter focused on how colonization and anti-Black racism and white supremacy are embodied by Ontario's child welfare sector in relations to narratives of suffering as experienced by Black families involved with this sector. This suffering reveals how Foucauldian concepts such as biopower and governmentality are in operation within the child welfare sector. Biopower as a concept coined by Michel Foucault refers to how power operates to ensure that individuals are docile, compliant, and engage in self-policing. At a macro level, biopower pertains to a form of power that governs and shapes the conduct and health of a population. Governmentality, another concept coined by Michel Foucault, and encompasses all the creative, socio-political, tactical, and strategic mechanisms deployed to govern and regulate a population. Now, biopower in the child welfare system is often manifested through a fear of Blackness. In the words of one Black youth, I quote, "I feel like staff are scared of us Black kids so that they try to get rid of us quickly. They don't try to understand us." OACAS 2016 was a reference. The biopower then implicated in the fear of Blackness is highlighted in instances when child welfare workers request police officers to accompany them on home visits to Black families. We assert that much of the police accompaniment is due to the workers' internalization of broader societal stereotypes of Black people as dangerous, criminal, volatile, and unstable. And by inviting the police on such visit, the worker is thus operationalizing individual and state power on Black bodies in hope of effecting docility, respect, and even compliance. This, Foucault would argue, is biopower. In summary, then, to alleviate the suffering being experienced by Black families, critical frameworks such as anti-Black racism and anti-colonialism are long overdue in the child welfare sector. I would like to add, at the beginning of this article, when Gordon and I accepted Donna's wonderful invitation, I was not involved in the child welfare sector at all. And since then, I've assumed a frontline position at the Durham Children's Aid Society. So if you can imagine how emotionally, psychologically, and physically this experience has been and how discombobulated it has been, but I feel I'm up for the challenge in the belly of the beast, as I call it at times. So again, thank you all to all the authors, and I look forward to reading your chapters.
Indeed. Many of us are working in particularly peoples of colours and First Nations peoples, and intersectionalities are working in very dangerous crocodile-infested, alligator-infested waters. Chapter 12 is called Getting to the Heart of the Matter. We've got Irene Carter, Roy Haynes, and Judy McDonald. Irene, I saw you. Would you like to start off, please? Or Roy?
Okay, I'll start off. My name is Roy Haynes. I'm speaking in to everybody from Ottawa. It's a blizzard outside. I think we're getting close to 20 centimeters of snow right now. It's on the unceded territories of the Algonquin peoples, and it's an inaccessible environment for people who are disabled. I've been working in the field for over 40 years, and I recently retired from Carleton University, and Judy and Irene were kind enough to give me first authorship, I think, as part of my retirement present. I'm not sure, but we always take turns. We've been working together for well over 25 years in this whole area of disability and social work. And I want to say publicly what a pleasure it's been working with these very fine people, these dedicated people, these very progressive women. And I thank you. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. The focus that we've took on this chapter was the link theory to practice as much as possible. And I'm going to read this so I don't leave too much out. And then I'm hoping Irene and Judy will follow up. But what we attempted to do was link emancipatory social work practice to disability through what's called through anti-oppressive social work. And it's always been part of our focus is this stand on disability. We connect anti-oppressive social work to a particular model of disability theory known as a social oppression model. So there was that connection. A social oppression model succinctly states primarily that it's society and all of its structures, all of its beliefs, all of its values that oppresses people who are disabled. The society in which we live is fundamentally ableist, fundamentally inaccessible. Our profession historically has been fundamentally ableist and fundamentally inaccessible to disabled peoples. Also, we have to recognize too that disability, ableism is a form of oppression, and people who are disabled recognize themselves as part of an oppressed minority. So more or less, a social oppression model views disability as not as an individual problem or an individual biomedical concern that needs to be fixed or changed, but we look at the social, political, historical, and cultural elements that lead to the oppression. Now, one of the things we recognized in our work as social workers is what's missing. And the piece that was missing is the actual effect of ableism, the actual consequences of disability. So we tried to link that to this notion of practice, to formulate the term of praxis, linking theory to practice. So here we have developed this notion of anti-oppressive disability practice, where we look at the day-to-day hardships of coping with physical realities of disability, mental, emotional pain, linked to impairment, not disability, and to show that anti-oppressive social work has to take a two-pronged approach: the clinical, the focus of direct practice, and the focus on advocacy. So I'll leave it there and turn it over to Irene or Judy.
I think we're past our time, Roy, so that's
Oh,
great.
sorry about that.
But we did get a very good
so
idea about your chapter, so thank you for that. And please go and read it. And I've tweeted about it as well, so go share my tweet as well, just so everyone gets it out there. Okay, so chapter 13 is on gender affirming care in Canada, and our authors can't be here with us today, so please go and check out that chapter if you're interested with that. And chapter 14 is anti-oppressive social work with older adults. So would any of the authors from that chapter like to go first? Excellent, Wendy.
Great. Thank you. Wait, I'm Wendy Holko, and I'm representing our team. Not all of us were able to be here today. And the fact that we are a team of writers is an indication of kind of our putting our politics into practice, or our anti-oppression gerontology principles into practice, and how we do AOP, because it's always been important to Shari and I, as now senior scholars, yes, it's always been important to us to partner with emerging scholars as well, and to amplify their voices and knowledge. And so we were pleased to partner with Ilian Ferrer, who I think is connected, though probably putting kids to bed at the same time, and Louise Stern might have connected by now from a board meeting. So this chapter began over 20 years ago when Shari and I first presented some of our ideas about integrating gerontological principles into anti-oppression at a CASWE conference. And we were so honored when Donna included us not only in the 3rd edition, but then invited us back for this 4th edition that has really been like renewed and refreshed. And it's a very exciting compilation. I am a settler born on Algonquin territory, which is on Vancouver Island, and was born to 2nd generation Canadians of Scottish and Scandinavian ancestry, or Nordic ancestry, and identify as a bi-queer woman who lives with episodic disabilities. And it's unfortunate that today is kind of an episodic day, but I can't lean on my co-authors today. So I am here in the unceded territory of Secwepemc Ulus, where Natalie is as well, though I'm in the small city, not in the rural area. And what we do in our chapter is we use counter storytelling, and counter storytelling was developed by critical race theorists. And so we use it both as a discursive strategy. We define it as a discursive strategy that mobilizes the stories of marginalized peoples about their experience and worldviews to disrupt normative understandings of the social world and challenges systems of oppression. So we also argue that you can use stories as practice, and this can be seen as a resistance strategy. What we really try to do with this chapter is to bring ageism and aging and older adults into the anti-oppressive practice fold, because it often gets left out. I think there's been an increasing awareness through the pandemic and through the climate crisis, with older adults being disproportionately affected by climate crises as well. And so we do put forward our 7 principles of anti-oppression gerontology, and we have 7 different counter stories through there that we've each authored based on real people or composite cases, the older adults that we've worked with. And what we end with is calling on people to join us in anti-oppression gerontology and using stories as a resistance strategy. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right, sorry, just make sure I feel like I'm sort of doing 6 things at once and I can't even do one at a time. So our chapter 15 is no one cares more about your community than you. Would any of the authors like to speak to that? Have we got anyone online?
I think it's me.
Excellent. Hi.
Hi. Okay, well, again, I don't know how I had chapter 2 and chapter 15. It was not purposeful. I just want to acknowledge, similar to Wendy, thank you, Wendy, for those words as well, that the praxis of, as Donna called it, the chapter with so many authors, I just want to acknowledge that this group of Indigenous scholars, elders, 2 people who I very much acknowledge as elders in my life, Jeffrey Moore, Lynn Knorr-Stuck-Sheep, who's actually Cookbee right now in Adams Lake and a social worker, Joanna Johnston-Virgo, who's from Tecumloops, Tisquetum, and one of our sessionals at TRU, Charnel Matthew, who's a new scholar, joined us at TRU, an anonymous who chose to be, but amazingly influential, a young Indigenous social worker, and then elders Norma Manuel and Jen Derrick. I just want to acknowledge the collective of writing. We actually, Doris brought us in, as our elder did, with story, and that's what we use in this chapter, is that story works, the stories of the Secwepemc peoples. And there's actually a story in here, the story of Snina, which is the owl story. I actually read it at my PhD defense. I won't read it here, but I do encourage you to read it. And we actually say we invite you, the reader, to join with us on this journey by reading the Snina owl story, to not remain absent from this knowing. We write you into this chapter with this story. Raven, who's not here, I know has done a lot of work with Cookbee, Wayne Christian, and they actually brought the owl story as a play to local community. And I took my children to it. And just after that, my son looked at me and he said, "Mom, you don't think I know the truth? How could you be a social worker?" He was like 7. So I think in terms of accountabilities, that sometimes it is the young ones who most hold us accountable to this praxis. Elder Norma, who I get to do wellness work within the nation, we're part of the Stamemel project, which is developing our own Indigenous sovereign ways of addressing children and not having them in the system. And for now, you know, Stamemel are the children. And I just want to acknowledge that there were more children discovered today. I don't even know, discovered the Stawule in our nation as well, Cookbee William Seller as well. And many of us who are writing this and responding to this, including co-author Joanna, that was her community. And we all work providing wellness support and counseling in the nation as well. And so I just really want to take that moment and think about that praxis as well. But but Norma shares 2 stories in here, Elder Norma, that are really important. The first, and they're short, so I'm just going to share them because I think they're important. So the first is when in the 1950s in the small community here, in 1955, there was a report about these children where they came in and took the 5 children. And what I did was go over there and tried to stop them. I knew the parents would eventually come back. So I said, "Can't you just wait a while?" And they said, "No, there's no food in the house." And at that time I could not provide. That was really hard. So the social worker made all the arrangements. And the saddest thing is none of those children ever came back home to our community. They all died, suicide, whatever. They never came back home. So from that time on, I became interested. She flashes forward to a story that I end with in terms of some hope, that she became a foster parent in her own nation, in her own community. And she said, afterwards, even when the police did not bring them to her home, the kids just came on their own. Some nights I'd have 25 kids playing in the yard. I'd only get 12 cinnamon buns, so we would cut them in 2. And now I get fish and they know to give me little packages. They know I like liver, so they give me these little packages. So I want to offer those 2 stories as a space to kind of, I guess, close. I know we have some final words, but I think that that's what gives me hope sometimes, but also those moments where I just want to say that I break up with social work all the time as part of this book launch. And maybe this book is a dismantling instruction book, you know, that one that tells you how to take apart the colonial nightmare with just one small Allen key and these simple instructions. Or maybe it's the book that lists all the ways to stay alive when your house is on fire, your car is sinking. Or maybe it's just a book about breaking up with an ex and finding a way to still talk to them. Maybe each of these authors is a match, or that tool you can carry on your keychain that will smash your car window, or a siren screaming, or just a book that might speak to a small moment of hope. Shh, can you hear it? I'm honored to have been asked to edit this book with Donna and Bindi into the many, many brilliant voices we were gifted to witness. So I just wanted to take that moment. That was my Instagram poem that I wrote when the book was launched. I was like, I'm still breaking up with social worker. How am I a part of another book? Anyways, Cook's Jam, and back over to you, Bindi. And it's been grateful to be in the circle with you.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not sure if you're on the socials, but if you want to go on Twitter and pop it up, I think that'd be beautiful to share with everyone else, and just to have and reshare and make it very popular. So the last section, but wait, there's more. In Australia, we have an ad, knife ad, where there's one more ad, knife. So there's of course our afterwards section. So would anyone from the afterwards section like to just have their have a conversation? I know we have one person on. Anyone else would like to speak about their afterwards or anything at all?
Bindi, I think we're going to start with Banakonda and Kennedy Kish. And
okay, great.
I think they're both
great. Here, I thought I saw them. Are they still here?
Checking.
Oh, here we go. Excellent.
You go first, Ben. Got a picture.
We just have some help. Yes, we can hear you, Ben. Go for it.
Okay, I don't know if you heard me, Banakonda. We've had some technical difficulties at times with hearing and so on. But I was suggesting that because Indigenous people were here first, that you as elder should speak first.
Hey, big witch. Bonjour, everyone. Anji Benisikwe, Indigenous Cause, Makwa and Dodem, Niso Madewian, Bawating and Donjaba, Anishinaabe, Kwe and Dow. Miigwech for this opportunity, and Miigwech for the opportunity to listen this evening. I very much enjoyed the rather broad comments and cross-section that will lead me back to this book to do some reading. I believe my comments are perhaps rather strong, in terms from my Indigenous perspective, 500 years of war. It's still going on, and that colonialism and the principle of sharing are fundamentally in conflict, and that this is a great challenge between ourselves, say perhaps how we say it back here in Canada, between the ship and the canoe, and that fundamentally a principle at the center for us that we would want to activate is balance and harmony, and that central belief is a belief we believe we came in here with, that came directly as a part of us, the spark of the all spirit, that we carry that in here fundamentally are seeking that in all of our relations, and not just our relationships with the two-legged ones, which always are forefronted, but in a way that we pursue balance and harmony in all our relationships by the way that we take up our place in the circle of life. And how important that is in this dialogue for me, in my understanding of how I might, as a person, taking up my place in my own circles, my fireside family, my extended family, my community, society as a whole, within creation. That is an essential subject matter to engage all the way through, for me, in listening this evening, in engaging my own activism. And at this stage of my life, when there is much more life behind me than there is ahead of me, what I've enjoyed tonight is the appearance of young people and the engagement of young people taking up their place in this circle. And so I want to say a miigwech for that. This Nokum in me feels hopeful, and I feel gratitude for this presence and my experience of this presence in our circle together this evening. I think lastly, I guess I want to reiterate, and this might be a bit of a brat in me, that the ship, not only the canoe, is on Turtle Island, and all the life that we receive from Turtle Island. And how can we engage that? How can we change our narrative to take up our place with each other, on the land, and begin to be more thoughtful, reflective, more heart engaged, more relationally engaged, not only with each other, and I think we're much in need of that, but also with creation. For me, this is deeply important in order to change the narrative that we need to change with each other, with those that are within our governance, are left out, who are unheard, who are unseen, and who are not valued in human life. I want to suggest, like my own beliefs are from my own tribal beliefs, that all life has personhood, not just us. And how do we engage that together, all of us? And what are the ways that we can engage in justice for all life? And because I believe there's no justice just for some, that there is a way in which we need to engage this attitude about life itself. And creation sustains us. And we have no life without creation. And we are the last. We are the last to arrive here and take up our place in creation. And so I'm raising my left hand from my heart side to engage in good relations with all life, and standing that up today from my place in the circle together with each of you. And in that way, I'd like to hand that over to Ben. I hope I haven't used all the time.
You did, but we allowed you, and I think that Ben is very gracious in knowing that our First Nations people should speak. What a talk that was. I had to tweet amen towards something what you were saying. Thank you, Grant. So our very last person before we wrap up is Wanda, speaking about Black Canadians and anti-oppressive social work. So Wanda, please.
Thank you so much, Bindi. I want to start by acknowledging that I'm joining you from my home in East Preston, Nova Scotia, unceded, unsurrendered Mi'kmaq territory. And I am privileged to live on land that was granted to my ancestors, Black loyalists, through their settlement of African people on this land. What a privilege it's been this evening to listen to all of the authors who've been able to join and share a bit of insight about the chapters. I want to thank the editors, Donna, Natalie, and Bindi, for inviting me to share in this work with an afterword. I have to admit, when I was first contacted, I said I was too busy to participate, but Donna, as most of you I'm sure know, is quite persuasive. And she convinced me that I should have a word. And I realize now this evening that it's almost the last word. And I've decided that I am going to read a couple of passages from that afterword itself, but a couple of highlights that really stand out for me as I listened to all of you this evening. And I've read some of the chapters, but not all. And I look forward to reading each of the chapters and using them in teaching. But one of the things that really jumps out is that social work and social workers have caused harm in our communities and to many citizens in our world, in our country. And so recognizing that, it makes this work, anti-oppressive social work, critical social work, so vitally important. And I sense that writing this work it's a form of resistance. Publishing about anti-oppressive social work is a form of resistance. It's also a form of healing. And I end my afterword with a call to action. And that's what I want to do this evening. So I'm going to read. In looking at change, people often ask, what needs to change first? The individuals or the systemic issues? I say it's not an either or, but it's a both and. People change systems. We need policy changes. We need research and race-based data collection and analysis. We need curricula and policy changes in educational programs. We need more diversity in our practitioners and our leaders. I am talking about transformative systems changes. Change is needed at all of these levels. Allies can help to lead the changes they want to see in the world. Authentic allies are those who walk the talk. They help those on the margins move to the center. Authentic allies find ways to break through the concrete ceilings and create braver spaces. And I conclude by saying, I believe that an appropriate call to action for social workers at this time in our collective journey is that we must all tap into our leadership potential. From this space, we can engage in critical self-reflection of our power and privilege and commit to using these allies in doing anti-oppressive practice. We can use our power to make a difference, which will lead to change. Remember, it is not a problem to have power or privilege. It's what you do with it that ultimately matters in this work. Thank you. And it's wonderful to see Ben here this evening.
Thank you. Donna, I will now hand to you for the final conversation, please.
Sure, I actually was going to let Wanda have the last word. Seemed only fair. But since I have the stage, we've run out of time for questions. We apologize if people would like to send them to any of us. I always say academics can run, but we cannot hide. You can find our emails all across the internet. So please send us questions or comments. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. Thank you again to our publisher, Fernwood, which has been a stalwart of publishing critical books through the many years and trying to keep the price low so that students and others can afford them. And thank you very much to my wonderful co-editors, Bindi and Natalie. They are absolutely just a dream to work with. Thank you to all the wonderful authors. This book only works because of all of you putting your formidable intellects and your deeply caring and compassionate views of the world into play in your writing. Thank you so very much. Thank you to all the students, all the instructors, all you folks out there making the world a better place. We love you all, quite frankly. So good night, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye, my friends.